Hello and good day. This is Dan Arth, and for the next hour, I will be reading from the May 6th issue of the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. From the headlines: Beacon of Moral Clarity, Carney names former Supreme Court Justice as next Governor General. Article by Alex Bollingal and Riza Patel. Luis Arbour, the pioneering war crimes prosecutor, human rights commissioner, and former Supreme Court Justice, was named Canada's 31st Governor General on Tuesday when Prime Minister Mark Carney proclaimed the need for someone of judgment and moral clarity in the post. Describing herself as serene and enthusiastic about the appointment, Arbour thanked King Charles III for accepting her nomination and pledged to stand for all Canadians when she is sworn in as the monarch's representative at Rideau Hall in a ceremony expected in early June. Arbour, 79, was born in Montreal. She will become the third woman from Quebec to assume the role since 2017, replacing Mary Simon, who became the first Indigenous Governor General in 2021. Canada is a wonderful country shaped by its diversity of people, of perspectives and experiences, but I think shaped also mostly by common respect for strong public institutions and for the rule of law, Arbour said, standing alongside Carney in the atrium of the National Gallery of Canada near Parliament Hill. Above all, we all strive to provide for each other in a spirit of equality and generosity. While stopping short of describing herself as a monarchist, a term she said is often used as a pejorative, Arbour defended the institution she will now represent as an essential part of Canada's constitutional arrangement. She noted that as Governor General, she will also serve as Commander-in-Chief of the Canadian Armed Forces, an institution on which she reported in recent years as a government-appointed commissioner probing widespread allegations of sexual misconduct. Expressing respect for soldiers, service, and professionalism, Arbour said, "Like them, I will strive to serve with honor, dedication, and integrity." Carney said in French that it is difficult to predict which crises or challenges might come up during the mandate of a Governor General, whose duty is to call upon party leaders to form governments and agree, or more rarely disagree, with Prime Minister's request to prorogue or dissolve parliaments to trigger an election. The most demanding part of that role is rarely seen. It's the duty to ensure the government in Canada is formed, sustained, and when the time comes, dismissed in accordance with law and convention. It's a duty that calls for sound judgment, deep learning, and an unwavering commitment to the rule of law, the Prime Minister said. Carney also praised Arbour for her distinguished legal career in Canada and abroad as a champion of human rights and international law. Arbour's legal career began in Quebec and saw her serve as a judge on Ontario's highest court before she entered the world of international law as the United Nations chief prosecutor for the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia and Rwanda in the 1990s. She is known for securing the first conviction under the 1948 Genocide Convention when prosecuting crimes relating to the Rwandan genocide. Arbour also clinched a war crimes indictment for Serbian President Slobodan Milosevic, the first for a sitting European head of state, for his role in the wars that erupted during the breakup of Yugoslavia. She sat on the Supreme Court of Canada from 1999 until 2004, when she left and became the UN's High Commissioner for Human Rights. She gave voice to those whose dignity was denied in places where the powerful preferred silence. She did not flinch, and she never confused being heard with being safe, Carney said. More recently, Arbour was appointed to oversee a review of the culture inside the Canadian Armed Forces amid a series of sexual misconduct allegations against high ranking soldiers. Among her recommendations in 2022 were overhauls of military colleges and outsourcing complaints of sexual assault and misconduct from military tribunals to the civilian court system. In every role she's held, the Honorable Louise Arbour has carried the same conviction that a free society depends on institutions properly being held to account, that the law stands between power and the powerless, that the dignity of every person should not be a product of accidents of geography, citizenship, or convenience, and that Canada's place in the world is to be a country that lives those propositions and helps others to live them as well, Carney said. Though supposedly above politics, the role of vice regent comes with close public scrutiny. At her news conference Tuesday, Arbour was pressed on her predecessor's lack of ability to speak French, a source of outrage from Quebec Francophone leaders in recent years. She was also pressed on recent comments to Radio Canada in which she called the U.S. Israel war on Iran pure folly. Asked whether she is worried about losing her freedom to speak out in her new job, Arbour noted her experience as an international figure and judge. I'm very, very conscious of the privileges and the power that comes with certain jobs and the constraints that we need to impose as a consequence, Arbour said in French. People understand very well the difference between private speech and the position that we express in the name of a post. Arbour was also asked about her criticism she received over her statements about Israel in 2008 from the Conservative government under Stephen Harper. At the time, Tory Cabinet Minister Vic Towes declared Arbour a disgrace after, in her role as the UN's Human Rights Commissioner, she warned that the killing of civilians during the Israeli-Lebanon War of 2006 could amount to war crimes. She also prompted a backlash over her support of an Arab human rights charter that called for the elimination of Zionism, the nationalist movement for a Jewish homeland that has played a role in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict for decades. Also from the headlines of the Toronto Star today, colorectal cancer screening age lowered. Province's move follows troubling rise in cases among younger adults. Article by Megan Ogilvie. Ontario is lowering the screening age for colorectal cancer, citing mounting evidence the disease is increasingly being diagnosed in younger adults. As of July 1st, adults can start getting screened at age 45 instead of age 50, according to Ontario Health document outlining key changes to the province's colon cancer check program. The policy shift is being heralded by doctors and patient advocacy groups who say that earlier screening will reduce both colorectal cancer diagnoses and deaths. Dr. Shadi Ashmala, a surgical oncologist at Toronto's Sunnybrook Health Sciences Center, said lowering the screening age will quite literally save lives. He said there is clear evidence that colorectal cancer is becoming more prevalent in younger adults. Earlier this year, a study revealed that colorectal cancer is now the leading cause of cancer mortality in people under 50. Research has also shown that people born after 1980 have a higher risk of developing colorectal cancer at younger ages than those born in previous generations. In response to the alarming trend, the Canadian Cancer Society and Colorectal Cancer Canada have been urging provinces and territories to lower the screening age. Studies show that most people can be cured when colorectal cancer is caught early. Ontario's decision to lower the screening age to 45 for average risk individuals reflects what the evidence has been telling us for years. Colorectal cancer is increasingly affecting younger adults, said Barry D. Stein, president and CEO of Colorectal Cancer Canada, adding the organization wants every Canadian to benefit from earlier detection. We commend Ontario for taking this important step, joining Prince Edward Island in leading the way. PEI became the first province to lower the screening start age in March. The U.S. and Australia have also lowered their start ages for colorectal cancer screening. The Ontario Health document addressed to primary care providers said the province's decision to lower the screening start age was informed by an expert panel and by modeling studies that showed the change would lead to fewer colorectal cancer diagnoses and deaths. Ontario's Ministry of Health did not respond to the STAR's questions, but in a statement to the Canadian press said the changes will help detect and treat cancer earlier. The ministry added that the recommendations build on the province's move 2 years ago to lower the age of breast cancer screening from 50 to 40. The new recommendations state people at average risk for colorectal cancer can get a FIT test or fecal immunochemical test starting at age 45. This is a simple at-home test that checks a person's feces for small amounts of blood that can be a sign of early cancer. The sample can be dropped off or mailed to a lab. People with a normal result can wait 2 years for another screen, while those who test positive will be referred for a colonoscopy. People with a close family history of colorectal cancer can begin screening at age 40. In our next article, we honor our lost women, our warriors. Red Dress Day, a painful reminder, moment of reflection for Indigenous communities supporters. Article by Sadine Mosen. At the Native Canadian Centre of Toronto, NCCT, Mark Carpenter started the red dress ceremony with drumming and an opening prayer, his eyes filling with tears as he thought of his sister. He has fond memories of the older sister who helped raise him, but there were long periods of time where she would go missing and come home bloodied and bruised with no clear memory of what happened to her. Over time, Carpenter said she began struggling with addiction, which led to longer-term memory issues. Carpenter's sister currently lives in a 24-hour care facility. She doesn't recognize our voices, he told the Star. My sister was taken spiritually. Behind him, the smell of burning wood, sweet grass, and sage spread across the front lawns of the NCCT on Tuesday morning. Several community members dressed in red shirts, including Carpenter, placed herbs on the sacred fire, seen as a spiritual gateway for healing and communication. The center is one of various locations across downtown Toronto commemorating Red Dress Day, a national day honoring missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and 2 SLGBTQI plus people. For many, it's a day of healing and remembering those whose lives were lost, while for others, it is a painful reminder of those that are still missing or whose deaths are unsolved, and the lack of support for Indigenous communities. We honor our lost women, our warriors, said Carpenter. More than 63% of Indigenous women have experienced physical or sexual assault in their lifetime, according to the Government of Canada's website. The Native Women's Association of Canada estimates that the number of 2MIWG2S plus is around 4,000. Inside the NCCT's haze-filled auditorium, a smudging ceremony, drumming, and flute performances took place. Many audience members sang along to the beat of the drums, while others kept their eyes closed and swayed to the sound. The music is a way to cope emotionally with generational trauma, said Nora Jane Boyer, president of the NCCT's board of directors, while the red symbolizes the blood of those who died, their hearts, and the love that was lost. It's hard to put into words, she said. It represents the love and the passing of them. Brenda Joy Lem, 65, attended the NCCT ceremony to show solidarity and build stronger relationships. She's put up educational posters around Chinatown to try and raise awareness about 2MIWG2S Plus within her community. She described a deep sorrow and a certain amount of rage because of the lack of answers and justice surrounding many 2MIWG2S Plus cases. We have a moral right to support indigenous communities, Lem said. At Sankofa Square, dozens of bright red dresses, shirts, and pants hung across the space. No More Stolen Sisters was splashed across the screens facing the square. Security officers could be seen patrolling. Monica McKay, Director of Indigenous Initiatives at Toronto Metropolitan University, said the number of 2MIWG2S plus cases is much higher than reported. Only two out of 231 calls for justice from the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls have been completed. McKay said it was critical to include and educate non-Indigenous people to help continued advocacy efforts. It's to have people understand that it's Red Dress Day for us every day. And you are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And moving over to sports in the Toronto Star. On the clock, Toronto wins number one pick in draft lottery despite having fifth best odds. Article by Kevin McGran. The smiles on the faces of John Shaka and Matt Sundin said it all. Their second day on the job running the Toronto Maple Leafs was a very good one. The Maple Leafs won the NHL draft lottery. They will pick first overall, giving them a chance at a franchise player like left winger Gavin McKenna of Penn State or Swedish forward Ivar Steinberg. Just really excited for the organization, for the fan base. It's a meaningful step, said Shaka, the newly installed general manager. Elated. Great night, great moment, said Sundin, the team's legendary captain, who is now a senior executive advisor. Both were side by side in a video conference call after the Maple Leafs defied the odds to pick first overall for the first time in franchise history. The first netted them former captain Wendell Clark. The second landed them current captain Austin Matthews. The Leafs had 85 of 1,001 combinations in the lottery machine, a TV event overseen by NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman. The winning numbers came out in order 7, 2, 11, and 12 as the Leafs moved up from the fifth best odds. San Jose moved up 7 spots to pick second. Vancouver fell from the first spot and will pick third. We needed some luck. We got some tonight, said Shaka. But it's a long road ahead. We've still got work to do. But when you get a first overall pick, it's a monumental opportunity. A decade ago, the same scenario played out with the Leafs winning the lottery to draft Matthews in 2016. Then, like this year, the draft was in Buffalo. That made the 2015-2016 season worth it. They had finished last overall. This year, though, they finished fifth from the bottom, felt even worse. They believed not just that they were a playoff team, but that they were Stanley Cup contenders. They were anything but. Anything that could go wrong did. It cost GM Brad trebling his job, and the hirings this week of Sundin and Sheikha were generally deemed to be underwhelming. But winning the first overall pick changes somewhat the narrative around the team, gives fans a reason to hope because a top prospect is going to land in their lap. There's a caveat, of course. The Leafs still owe the Boston Bruins a first-round pick to complete the Brandon Carlo trade, so Toronto will likely give up the 2028 pick with no lottery protection. And now there's no top 10 protection on the 2027 pick destined for Philadelphia in 2027. The good news is the Leafs have their pick of the crop of the 2026 draft set for June 26th and 27th. The players at the top may not have the franchise-shaping gravitas of Islanders defenseman Matthew Schaefer or San Jose Star center Macklin Celebrini, the most recent first overall picks. But they're close. If the Leafs want a forward, they can choose between McKenna or Stenberg. McKenna, 15 goals, 34 assists in 35 games, is the highest-rated North American skater, according to NHL Central Scouting. Exciting player, Sheikha said of McKenna. The skill level, creativity, the puck ability, his shot and release, it's all pretty special. Stenberg, 11 goals, 22 assists in Sweden's top league, is the top-rated European. Ivar has had a strong season, said Sundin. McKenna is expected to be named to Team Canada for the May 15th, June 1st World Championships in Switzerland. Stenberg will be on Team Sweden. Sheikha indicated the team's biggest need might be on defense. The team lacks speedy, skilled blue liners like Schaefer, Montreal's Lane Hudson, and Minnesota's Quinn Hughes. The top defensemen available in the draft are Keaton Verhoff of the University of North Dakota and Chase Reed with the Soy Greyhounds. NHL Central Scouting ranks Verhoff as the second best North American skater. He is 6'4", 212 pounds, and right-handed. He's got a booming shot with 6 goals, 14 assists in 36 games. He had 4 assists for Canada at the World Juniors. Reed is 6'3", 195 pounds, and rated 4th among North American skaters. He had 18 goals, 30 assists in 45 games with the Greyhounds. He's committed to Michigan State next season. Obviously, we want the smartest, fastest, most skilled, best scorer you can get, said Sheikha. When you trade things off, I want hockey sense and competitiveness. When you're picking this high, skill level is going to be strong across the board and always highly valued. The Leafs now have 7 picks this summer. First overall, 2 in the 3rd round, 1 in the 4th, 2 in the 5th, and 1 in the 6th. And staying with sports, NHL playoffs. Canadians expect more goals in round 2. Sabres style riskier than Lightning, Slafkovsky says. Article by Alex Belanger-Champagne. The first round series between the Montreal Canadiens and the Tampa Bay Lightning was very tight, and aside from possibly Game 6, neither team gave the other much space. This could change in the second round when the Canadiens face the Buffalo Sabres. I feel like there is more risk in their game. Forward Yuri Slafkovsky said, and I feel like we can use that to our advantage. It's going to be good hockey. Honestly, I'm excited for Wednesday. Game 1 of the series is set for tonight at KeyBank Center in Buffalo. The Sabres eliminated the Boston Bruins in 6 games in the first round, finishing them off last Friday. The Canadiens knocked out the Lightning with a 2-1 victory in Game 7 on Sunday in Tampa. Montreal decided to stay in Tampa and give players a day off in the sun Monday. They were back to work Tuesday, holding a practice at the Lightning's training facility before flying to Buffalo. I think it was an important day for the players to be able to disconnect a little bit, Canadiens coach Martin St. Louis said. Now We have to start again. It's great. We won. We had good emotional high, and now it's about coming back down to ground level and building back up to that again. Forward Alexandre Texier agreed it's good to have a little break of 2 days to reset. He said St. Louis emphasized transition play to counter the Sabres' forecheck during a drill at practice. While there's a perception the series against the Sabres could be more offensive, the coach stressed that won't change the Canadiens' basic principles. Games can be different. We have an idea of how they play, and it won't change how we want to play. He said, you just have to play the game that's in front of you. When there's not a lot of space, you have to let the puck do the work. You have to forecheck more. We'll see. We're ready. We will play the game that's in front of us. Montreal and Buffalo split their 4-game series. They each scored 13 goals in those matchups, all decided by 2 goals. When we played them, there was a lot of scoring, forward Josh Anderson said. But I think in the playoffs that slims down a little bit. Teams play more defensively and more structured. So I expect it to be a close-knit game Wednesday night and physical too. That could help the Canadiens' offensive weapons get going again. Slafkovsky scored 3 power play goals in the opener against the Lightning, but was quieter afterward. Cole Caulfield had just 1 power play goal after finishing the regular season with 51 goals. Nick Suzuki finally found the back of the net in the deciding game. It takes everyone. You can't rely on just one guy or one line, Texier said. Our next article in sports, backup, backstop, backs it up. Valenzuela has shown great work behind the plate with Kirk sidelined. Opinion article by Mike Wilner. Brandon Valenzuela is an extremely confident young man, though he may not be the best with a calendar. When I approached him to ask about his first month in the big leagues, he was shocked. It's been a month already? Sure has. And since the 25-year-old got things started with a single on the second pitch he ever saw in the big leagues on April 5th, he has established himself as a strong defensive catcher, though the offense has been up and down. That first hit stemmed from a batting practice conversation the day before, his first day in the majors, with hitting coach David Pumpkins and a few of his new teammates. George Springer was joking that you only get one first pitch in the big league, so take advantage of it, said Valenzuela in a conversation for the current episode of The Deep Left Field, the Stars Baseball podcast. Then Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Andre Jimenez, and the Latin guys were like, hey, don't be afraid to get it on the first day. 5 days later, back at home in Toronto, came the first home run, a no-doubter into the visiting Minnesota Twins right field bullpen. The rookie celebrated his way through the Jays dugout, but once he got to the end of the line, screamed Cody, looking for first-year assistant hitting coach Cody Atkinson. He told me before the game, you're going deep today, recalled Valenzuela. Atkinson did indeed tell Valenzuela that, and more than once. It started when they were working in the batting cage pre-game, getting ready for Twin starter Simeon Woods Richardson. Atkinson said it was going to be a special night. It's happening tonight, Atkinson told Valenzuela. This is the guy. It's going to happen. Just trust me. It's happening. The prophecy continued as the Jays went out for batting practice. It was a Friday night, so they were wearing their City Connects jerseys. Atkinson asked Valenzuela if he liked the alternate uniforms, and his young charge answered in the affirmative. Well, you better love them, Atkinson said, because every time you watch the video of your first Major League homer, it's going to be wearing these uniforms. Atkinson was right, and Valenzuela was ecstatic, but it would be almost 3 weeks until he went deep again. Between home runs, Valenzuela managed only 3 hits, but did some outstanding work behind the plate. All the things that you want to check off: receiving, blocking, throwing. He's got those skills, said manager John Schneider before the Jays took off on their current road trip. And you are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. That was no surprise to Valenzuela, who believes he's been ready for a while. This might sound cocky to people, but I see it as a big confidence, said Valenzuela. I've always been a catcher, and I've been a big league catcher for my last 3 years. It's just my hitting side. We were expecting it to make a spark, and it did this spring training. Now we're here. He's here because his Mexican countryman, Alejandro Kirk, took a foul tip off the thumb in the first week of the season and is still recovering from surgery to fix the fracture. But while he had to bide his time behind veteran backup Tyler Henneman for most of his first month in the majors, Valenzuela is set up for more and more playing time until Kirk returns. Henneman was benched Sunday after popping up on the first pitch with the bases loaded and 2 out in the 6th inning Sunday in Minnesota with the Jays trailing 4-1. It was an unusual, if not unprecedented, move by Schneider, who told reporters manager's decision when asked about the change after the game. Going into Tuesday night's game against the Tampa Bay Rays in St. Petersburg, Florida, Valenzuela had thrown out 5 of the 11 runners who had tried to steal on him, a 45.5% success rate that led the American League. He was tied for 5th in the majors in catcher framing runs. Henneman was tied for 2nd and sat 6th in fielding run value for catchers. Still, the manager thinks there are things he needs to work on. To be an established major league catcher, you've got to understand game plans, said Schneider. You've got to understand where you're setting up, and you've got to understand game situations. That's the last box to check off. Going back the last couple of years, I talked about the same things with Kirk. The quicker Valenzuela can continue to develop, that is going to be good for him. But he's got to get some pretty elite defensive skills. The need for further development with game situations showed up in Tuesday's loss to Tampa Bay as Valenzuela used 3 ABS challenges in the 3rd inning, missing on 2 of them and leaving the Jays unable to challenge for the rest of the game. Offensively, since Valenzuela cut down his stride in the batter's box, he's hit .313 with 2 home runs in 6 games. When Kirk returns near the end of this month, Valenzuela will likely go back down to AAA in order to get everyday at-bats, but he'll be back. It might still be a diamond in the rough right now, but it looks like the Jays could have themselves another gem behind the plate. And moving over to the business section article, $60 million in empties not returned in 2025. Province beer store keep windfall from more than 560 million containers. Article by Patty Winza. More than $60 million in container deposits paid on alcohol purchases went unredeemed by Ontario consumers in 2025, a windfall kept by the province and the beer store, the Star has found. The Star calculated the $60 million windfall based on numbers in a new report published by the beer store and is the accumulation of deposits charged to customers on more than 560 million alcohol containers sold by the LCBO grocers, convenience stores, and the beer store in 2025 that were not returned for redemption. The numbers aren't surprising, said an environmental critic, given that the beer store has closed more than 120 locations over the past year, making it harder for consumers to return empties. But the decline in return rates, about 10 percentage points below where they were 9 years ago, is a worrying trend, said Karen Wersig, a senior program manager with the nonprofit Environmental Defense. 9 years ago, return rates for Ontario's deposit programs were above 80%. It's pretty urgent for the beer store, the grocers, and the alcohol producers to work to restore accessible locations for people to return their empties, said Wersig. At least $57 million in deposits were not redeemed in 2024, a 2-year total for lost deposits of nearly $120 million. The data published in the beer store's annual stewardship report shows sales and redemptions, which refers to containers returned to the beer store for the 10 or 20 cent deposit, depending on size, for 2 deposit programs. One is the province's Ontario Deposit Return Program, ODRP, which allows deposits to be charged on spirits, wine, cider, and mixed drinks sold by grocers, convenience stores, and the LCBO, and which is managed by the beer store. In 2025, 188 million of those containers were not returned, totaling an estimated $23.6 million in unredeemed deposits. Another 375 million beer containers, about a quarter of the total sold at the beer store and LCBO in 2025, were not returned to the retailer, which runs its own separate deposit program on beer containers. Those unredeemed deposits were worth at least $37.6 million. Together, the total unredeemed deposits for both programs was more than $60 million in 2025. However, both the province, the beer store, and even critics say the programs are still valuable. The province's Ministry of Finance, which oversees the ODRP, said in an email that the deposit program continues to support high recovery rates, reduces litter, and helps to keep costs down for consumers by supporting the efficient drop-off and collection of alcoholic containers. The unredeemed deposits help run the program. However, the province expanded alcohol sales to thousands of convenience stores and grocery stores while allowing the beer store to close locations as part of the deal to expand sales. That means returns can only be made to a limited number of beer store and redemption depots. Return patterns have become more complex, said Ozzy Ahmed, the beer store's vice president of retail, in an email. We recognize there's more to do to make returning empties as easy and convenient as possible. Ahmed said the beer retailer is actively trying to find new authorized empty return depots to partner with, and will be launching a public awareness campaign this year to encourage Ontarians to participate in the program. It's hard to know where the nearly 600 million missing containers are ending up. Some of the material, though, is landing in the blue box, according to Alan Langdon, CEO of Circular Materials, which manages Ontario's privatized residential recycling system. Langdon said in an email that an estimated 25,000 tons of used alcohol containers are expected in residential recycling this year, despite the fact that alcohol producers do not pay into the privatized program. Empties have their own reuse and recycling stream through the Ontario and beer store deposit programs. The tonnage represents hundreds of millions of individual alcohol containers in the blue box system, said Langdon. Where the rest of the missing alcohol containers are, as in the garbage or recycling from condos, apartment buildings, or institutional and commercial venues, which, as Langdon notes, are outside of Circular Materials' purview, is anyone's guess. Large sports and entertainment venues such as Rogers Centre and Rogers Stadium may account for millions of the unredeemed alcohol containers. Both venues say they recycle empties instead of returning them to the beer store, although Rogers Centre does return used liquor bottles for the deposit. On the other hand, Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, which owns Scotiabank Arena and BMO Field, said it separates all the aluminum collected and returns beer and other cans to the beer store for the deposit. In the last couple of years, Ontario's deposit return programs have taken a hit as the Ford government expanded alcohol sales to convenience stores and more grocers. Grocers who sold alcohol as part of Ford's plan to expand sales were supposed to set up deposit return programs in January of this year. Instead, the grocers made a deal with the beer store, which agreed to take returns on their behalf for a fee. Meanwhile, the beer store began closing stores in the first half of 2025, part of the deal it made with the province when the government decided to expand sales of alcohol, including beer, ending the beer retailer's monopoly on 12 packs and 24 packs of beer. Deposit return programs are considered to be one of the most successful ways to get used beverage containers back, say experts. Return rates in provinces that have deposits on all beverages, not just alcoholic ones, achieve higher return rates than Ontario. It's the best thing we have, said Wirsig of Ontario's deposit programs. We want to see that shored up. If you don't have the ability to participate in the system because you don't live in an area where you can actually return your containers, then it becomes like a tax. Moving over to the culture section of the Toronto Star, Middleton's health relationships on display in Kate. New biography digs into Princess of Wales cancer diagnosis, her thoughts on Meghan. Andrew. Article by Sarah Lang. A new biography of Kate Middleton hits the shelves Tuesday, and it's packed with tidbits about the woman who will one day be Queen of England. There are no major bombshells in Kate by Christopher Anderson, a veteran royal biographer with 18 New York Times bestsellers to his name. As one of his sources says, what you see is what you get with the Princess of Wales. And in case the exclamation point didn't tip you off, this is a largely flattering portrait of a shrewd, kind, and brave woman navigating an extraordinarily strange life. What Anderson does do is fill in some of the blanks in the broader story we know about the Princess of Wales. From details about her cancer journey and how she really feels about Meghan Markle, here are some of the most interesting takeaways. Kate was having abdominal pain for weeks before her surgery. While Anderson doesn't claim to know exactly why the Princess of Wales was brought in for what the palace called planned abdominal surgery in January 2024, he does share that she had been experiencing abdominal pain for several weeks before. According to Anderson, the surgeons who operated on Kate on January 16, 2024, were secretly flown in from Italy and had previously operated on Pope Francis. It's not clear why the princess didn't have British doctors at the London clinic, but according to Anderson, she was initially told that the procedure went swimmingly, but within 72 hours was told that lab results revealed cancerous cells that required preventive therapy. She may have had bladder cancer. Anderson does not know the type of cancer that Kate had, although he shares speculation from the director of the cancer center at the same Italian hospitals her doctors hailed from. According to Giampaolo Tortora, women like Kate who had suffered from extreme morning sickness were at higher risk for several cancers, most notably bladder cancer. The palace has never publicly shared the kind of cancer that Kate had. Kate had a major crush on Prince William as a teenager. One of the main beats of any story about Kate is how she and her mother did or didn't plot her path to the throne. Anderson's sources seem to suggest that while not precisely Machiavellian, none of it was accidental. Her mother, who came from a working class background and whose ambition saw her build a highly successful company, was apparently laser focused on breaking her family into the upper class. Kate, for her part, was infatuated with Prince William like many other teenage girls in the late 1990s. Anderson says she had a life-size poster of him on her wall at boarding school, inhaled anything written about him, and even monitored his official schedule on the palace website. Kate had reservations about Meghan. Anderson claims that Kate didn't know what to make of Markle, although her big sisterly instincts were telling her that the divorced American actress might not be the best fit for Harry, and she put off meeting her for 2 months. She was also suspicious of Markle's compliments about her style and felt there was a culture clash between her American ways and how Brits did things like talking about your hormones. And you are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Back to Middleton's book, Kate, with an exclamation point at the end. She is physically sickened by Andrew's behavior. Once he was banished from royal public life following allegations of sexual assault by then teen-aged Virginia Giuffre, Kate apparently banned Andrew from all of her events and refused to speak to him. Anderson quotes a volunteer staff writer, Christmas Carol event, who says she denied a request for the disgraced royal to even sneak in a side door and watch. She is a very kind and forgiving person, but not when it comes to abusing children. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor has strenuously denied any allegations. Camilla, Kate, and William have all apparently lobbied the king to banish Andrew from the firm once and for all, and she apparently told a friend that she was physically sickened by the damage Andrew's actions were doing to the institution her children would one day inherit. Moving over to news stories. Sinkhole snares waste truck. Work crews use giant crane to free trapped vehicle. Article by J.P. Antonacci. A garbage truck making the rounds in downtown Simcoe, Ontario, Tuesday ended up needing to be rescued after a giant sinkhole opened up under the vehicle just off the main drag. The back end of the blue Norfolk disposal truck was swallowed by a sinkhole that formed in a parking lot facing Norfolk Street near the intersection of Water Street. There is a disposal truck that's literally in a parking lot. You don't see this every day, Norfolk OPP Andrew Gamble said in a video on social media announcing Norfolk Street would be closed for several hours between Peel and Victoria Streets while working crews brought in a giant crane to free the trapped truck. Fortunately, there are no injuries to report here, Gamble said. Henry Nelson runs a contracting business within sight of the parking lot that now sports an impressive sinkhole. We are kind of still wondering how they gave a whole new meaning to taking out the trash, he said in a video posted to Facebook. Christy Maidema from the Simcoe and District Chamber of Commerce also went on Facebook to encourage onlookers checking out the sinkhole to patronize a local business. I'm a yummy freeze at lunchtime, and there's not a soul in here because there's some excitement happening with the garbage truck that fell in a hole today, said Maidema from inside a snack shop steps from the sinkhole. Nelson's video showed workers attach thick yellow straps to the garbage truck before the crane slowly winched the stuck truck from the asphalt trap. Next article from the news. Saskatchewan, new law can force addicts to get treated by the Canadian Press. Saskatchewan's government has passed a law that can force drug treatment on those battling drug addiction. Addictions Minister Laurie Carr said the province still needs to develop regulations and that there is no timeline on when involuntary treatment services would begin. The legislation passed with Premier Scott Moe's Saskatchewan Party government holding the majority vote. The opposition voted against the bill, with NDP leader Carla Beck arguing the province didn't put enough protections in place. She said rights shouldn't be violated and involuntary treatment should only be a very last resort. Carr said those admitted into forced treatment would be provided legal representation throughout all stages of their assessment. We have individuals who are a harm to themselves, harm to others, and don't have the capacity to actually make that decision to get treatment that they need, she said on Tuesday. Moving over to British Columbia news, Sea-Doo rider hurt in collision with whale. Article by Nono Shen. Andy Zafka and his wife had set up their cameras on the seawall at Stanley Park in Vancouver on Monday evening, hoping to admire nature and maybe get a glimpse of a pod of orcas or the gray whale that had been seen feeding nearby. But screams preceded the horrible experience that came next when a man on a Sea-Doo sped into view and slammed into the gray whale just after it had surfaced, sending the watercraft airborne in a crash that Zafka blamed on irresponsibility and ignorance. The rider was thrown from the craft and badly injured, with ambulance officials saying he was taken to the hospital in a serious condition. Royal Canadian Marine Search and Rescue said the animal's fate was unclear, though Zafka said it was surfacing again soon after the crash. The collision was captured on video from multiple angles on Monday evening, prompting gasps and curses from those gathered at the shoreline to watch the whale that had been feeding in the area over the past week. Zafka, a photographer, said he first saw the rider speeding towards Lions Gate Bridge before turning around and heading closer to shore, and people were screaming at him, "Slow down, there is a whale here," said Zafka. But the rider was going fast and hit the whale hard, said Zafka. I think everyone was quite concerned that probably it just got killed, but then it definitely resurfaced, said Zafka, who added that the rider was screaming for help. Marine Search and Rescue said officers responded to a Mayday call around 7:35 p.m. after the crash near Siwash Rock. The organization said the operator of the Sea-Doo was given first aid on a nearby yacht. And one of its vessels then taken to shore, where they were picked up by ambulance. The Federal Fisheries Department said it was aware of the incident and was trying to assess any injuries to the whale. Moving over to business for our final article, Canada posts first trade surplus since September. Shipments of oil, gold help reverse February's deficit. Article by the Canadian Press. Canada posted its first merchandise trade surplus since September as increased shipments of gold and higher oil prices drove exports to their highest level in more than a year. Statistics Canada said Tuesday the country posted a merchandise trade surplus of $1.8 billion in March, compared with a deficit of $5.1 billion in February. Oil soared in March as the U.S. and Israel attacked Iran in a war that has all but halted tanker traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, a key route for oil from the region. Nathan Jansen, assistant chief economist at RBC, said the surge in oil prices and another jump in gold exports were the main factors pushing Canada's trade balance back into surplus in March. Beyond those products, the data was mixed but broadly consistent, with an external demand backdrop still under pressure from U.S. tariffs, but also still showing signs of stabilization, Jansen wrote in a report. Total exports rose 8.5% to $72.8 billion in March, the highest level since January of 2025. The increase came as exports of energy products gained 15.6% at $17.1 billion, helped by an 18.9% increase in crude oil exports due to the sudden increase in prices. Exports of metal and non-metallic mineral products also rose 24% to a record $15.3 billion in March as exports of unwrought gold, silver, and platinum group metals and their alloys, a category largely composed of unwrought gold, increased 37.7%, driven by higher gold exports to the United Kingdom. Excluding metal and non-metallic mineral products and of energy products, exports rose 1.1% in March. Meanwhile, total imports fell 1.6% to $71 billion in March, as imports of consumer goods fell 3.9% to $13.3 billion. Imports of aircraft and other transportation equipment and parts also dropped 12.8% in March, after rising 13% in February. In volume terms, total exports edged down 0.3%, while import volumes fell 2%. Regionally, Canada's trade surplus with the United States increased to $7.1 billion March, compared with $2.9 billion in February, as exports of oil and passenger cars and light trucks rose. Canada's trade deficit with countries other than the United States narrowed, was $5.3 billion in March, compared with $8 billion in February. In a separate report, Statistics Canada said the country's monthly international trade in services balance posted a deficit of $100 million in March, compared with a surplus of $100 million in February, as imports of services rose 1.7% and exports of services added 0.5%. When international trade in goods and services are combined, Statistics Canada said the country posted a total trade surplus of $1.7 billion in March, compared with a deficit of $5 billion in February. And you have been listening to a reading of articles and features from the May 6th issue of the Toronto Star. Your reader has been myself, Dan Arth, and I thank you for listening.